Um, Hello, everyone.
Oh, hey guys, so please, hey guys, yeah, you can start on.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, hello, everyone. Before we begin, I think I would like to give this basic ground rules for this meeting. That way, we keep track of it as we move along in our discussion. So the first thing is that if you are not the one speaking, please mute yourself. If you are not the one speaking, mute yourself. And please ensure, like I've already observed, people have a very quiet background. Sometimes people that do join Zoom conference, they do join the conference with a lot of noise in the background. So I would appreciate if your background is very, very quiet. And then the third thing we need to do is that if you have any specific question why somebody is on the platform presenting, you can go into the chat and then place your question there. We'll pick up your questions and ask the question too as well. So, or better still, you can raise your virtual hands and we'll recognize you. You can make your comment or ask your question. As you may be aware, this meeting is going to last for an hour and 30 minutes. So during this meeting, we expect the interactions. It's a platform that we are going to learn from each other, share our experiences that we have had. COVID-19 pandemic, has brought a lot of adverse effect on not just the government, but individual taxpayers, businesses as well. So today, as the panelists are aware, we'll be discussing tax and fiscal policy in response to the So Tabo, you don't mind, you can begin by introducing yourself.
All right. Thank you so much, Gifty. My name is Tabo. I am I'm a lot of things. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business coach, I'm an investor. And by professional background, I'm a chartered accountant. I'm also a member of Chartered Accountants Worldwide. And my passion lies in the development of small businesses and the development of professionals. I live in South Africa and we've got about 30% unemployment rate. And with that, you find that some of them are graduates that, that are professional graduates and so forth. So what we do is we work with them and, try to start small businesses and then from then, invest in those and then seek more funding for them. So I don't know if I'm touching all the bases, but I think a lot will just unravel as we go on. Thank you. I think you're still on mute.
Sorry, I muted myself. So Surah, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good evening, all. This is Srihari Naidu, economist at National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, India, which is a autonomous institution under research think tank under Ministry of Finance, Government of India. So we do work for in the area of public finance, taxation, public debt, and fiscal federalism issues. And we assist different state governments as well as ministries. Thank you.
Okay. So I want to welcome you again to this platform. And today, as you may be aware, we'll be discussing tax and fiscal policy in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, looking at Africa and India. So for me, I consider as looking at two continents, that is Asia and that of Africa. So in terms of resilience, in terms of the confidence after this whole COVID-19, how do we survive? As we may be aware, the OECD recent report have shown a downward trend in economic growth, compared to previous year, that is 2019 November, from 2.9% now to 2.4%. So these things, I mean, this situation is affecting not just government, but it's affecting individual businesses. It is affecting taxpayers, and it's affecting everyone. I mean, COVID-19 have come and have changed everything. We are still trying to adjust to the new norms and everything like that. So the first question is, I think people on this platform will want to know is that how has COVID-19 impacted South Africa and that of India's economies, with specific emphasis on the tax system or the tax administration and the overall impact on domestic revenue? So, Tabo, do you care to take the lead?
Okay, sure. Thank you so much. I'm just going to go through my notes, right?
Okay.
South Africa has been badly affected by COVID in that since the 20th or so of March, we've been on lockdown. So we were on very strict lockdown since then, and then they've gradually been, opening up businesses and the economy on a gradual basis. And that's seen a lot of, small businesses suffering from, collecting revenue and so forth. There's two things that are worth noting. So because of our health system is not matured, when the economy was closed, it was to prepare our hospitals for this. And one of the things that the government decided on was to ban alcohol, because alcohol leads to a lot of fatalities that put a lot of strain on our health sector. So they've banned alcohol, they've banned cigarettes. And as a result of that, we have lost about 18 billion rands, which is $1 billion US in tax revenue, just from alcohol and cigarette sales alone. So that's already taking a huge chunk out of the fiscal budget. Over and above that, the government had to put in measures to make sure that small businesses are still keeping afloat, and then they launched a 500 billion rand, what we call a relief fund, which is about 28 billion US dollars. And with that 28 billion US dollars, it was meant to, half of it was meant to be given to small businesses like ourselves, to cover, salaries and. So these are some of the measures that I'll speak to later, but we've seen a lot of retrenchments. We've seen a lot of, multinationals struggling. We're seeing, the airlines, the tourism industry, food. It's just a bloodbath overall here.
Before we move on to Suri, so how effective have these measures been over the time? How effective have these measures been? All those measures, especially for the SMEs.
Right. So I think they've been effective it depends. We'll look at all the factors. So one, closing the economy has led to a lot of job losses, right? Then the relief funds, we have also found that although they have helped some small, medium enterprises, they only supplemented our salary bill, for example. So now, because we're not making money and the economy is closed, they can only give you up to $1,000 per person, as to compensate for their salaries, whereas maybe that person is earning twice that amount. So they've been effective for the SMEs, I guess, but then for the government in terms of revenue collection, it's hitting them because it's got a double blow. On the one hand, you're losing, $1 billion US in tax revenue. Then you're also losing, corporate tax that you would have been collecting. Now with the retrenchment, you're also losing on personal income tax that you would have been collecting. And then on the flip side, now you're spending about 18 billion more to try and deal with this, so you can upgrade the hospitals, buy protective equipment, and so on and so forth. So the blow has really been big, and the measures that were taken under the circumstances, we would say they are understandable. Because I'll just give you a brief background. Just at the beginning of July, the alcohol ban was lifted. And when the alcohol ban was lifted, the number of critical cases in hospitals shot up, which meant that the government does not have capacity, because some of the areas of our industry was opened. So the government did not have capacity to deal with COVID cases whilst also attending to this. And about a week ago, the president came and said, we are banning alcohol again. Yeah, so some of the measures have had both a positive and a negative impact. But I think we applaud the government for being innovative in this space.
Yeah, I think South Africa is doing a great job because, like you said, losing 1 billion in tax revenue is something that is very crucial and very critical to any economy. And right now, with all that is ongoing, you need that money, but you are losing it, and you have to make sure that you give stimulus packages to that of the SMEs to keep them afloat. So let's go to Asia, that is India, to see how I say ban for South Africa. South Africa said they have bans on alcohol, they have bans on cigarette, and in the midst of all of that, they are losing billions of US dollars and making sure that the small and medium enterprises are afloat in this difficult time. So what has been some of the measures that India have taken also?
Thank you, Dipti. First, we need to go to the couple of years back, in the sense actually now India pandemic has hit Indian economy at the time when we're trying to get back the Indian economy from a slow growth momentum to the high growth momentum. So for this financial year, we were supposed to, we were trying expecting the growth rate of 5%. But after the pandemic, now IMF and other estimates shows that the growth is not going to be not more than 1.2% to 1.8%. So we can imagine the 4% growth erosion and the kind of magnitude that hit in the economy. And that is primarily as due to the long lockdown we have, and there's supply chain broken, and then there is a lot of liquidity crunch. So when there is all of this are happening, literally that means there is no economic activity happening in the economy. So the immediate impact of this no economic activity or the very less economic activity is basically no tax revenues to the government. So because we collect taxes on the economic activity which is happening and the production which we generate through economic activity. So as we already know, India is a federal structure. So that means we have a tax powers are distributed between the central government as well as state governments. So tax revenues plummeted across the board, whether it be the central tax or state tax. So now we have a new tax, which is combined tax, which is called goods and service tax. Basically, it's an extension of VAT. I know. So even the GST revenues were completely down. Then now the question is actually how do we respond? I mean, how do we respond exactly? The problem is unprecedented, and this pandemic actually, unlike earlier pandemics or the crisis which we faced, is completely different because the pandemic affected both demand side factors as well as supply side factors deeply. So if at all we are any economy actually wants to revive the growth or revive the economic activity, it has to simultaneously address the demand side factors on the one hand and the supply side factors on the other hand at the same time. So we need to support the generation of incomes and protect the incomes, so to revive the demand. On the other hand, we need to support and revive the output, which is production on the supply side. So then we can match demand and supply, and then economic activity will follow suit. So this is what the whole idea is. So, but now there is another problem. I mean, when you don't have revenue and when you don't have money, how do you support? So, the Indian government actually uh, come up with a mix of both monetary policy as well as fiscal policy measures. Reserve Bank of India basically come up with liquidity infusion mechanisms and credit infusion mechanisms, where interest rates for repo rate was brought down, and then two new credit lines for mutual funds, NBFC, was introduced, and then there's moratorium on all kinds of repayment of loans and all introduced. In all, around 8 lakh crore package was there from the Reserve Bank and monetary policy side. Apart from that, on the fiscal front, the fiscal policy, the government has come up with a 20 lakh crore package, which is equivalent to about 10% of GDP. But the new estimate shows that the additional resources which was generating, which was actually spent on this 20 lakh crore, is around only the additional budgetary source is only about 10% of the total figure which is mentioned. So in these two measures of monetary policy and fiscal policy, and trying to address the demand side factors through employment generation through Manrega. There is a program called Manrega, which is and then there is a Garib Kalyan Roजगार Yojana, which is introduced basically to create employment, which will generate incomes. So on the other side, various supportive mechanisms like to MSME, to liquidity infusion in MSME, and a lot of tax reliefs. I'll talk about it, tax reliefs specifically on the next item, next question.
Okay.
So various tax, non-tax measures were also introduced to deal with this kind of situation. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much for that information. I mean, it is, like I said to Tabo from South Africa, it is quite a critical time for every economy, every country in the world. People are still struggling. Nobody, no method or no measure fits it all. But I think all of the economists and all of the leaders are trying to see or ensure that businesses are kept afloat, that the unemployment, people who have lost their jobs can have something like more like a stimulus package that they can get. And the good thing that India is doing is the reduction from the monetary side in the how they call it, the reduction in the interest rate. And that is something that is very key in helping to lift people from poverty in this kind of crucial time. So my next question would be, what have been some of the, I think I've asked that question already in my conversation, what has been some of the specific policy measures, and how effective have these measures been over the period left for India with the reduction in the interest rate? How effective has all of this been, and how are the citizens responding to this kind of measures that have been put in place by the government? Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. First, the policy response. I'll talk a bit about policy response of tax response with respect to, in the sense, fiscal policy response to the pandemic, and then I'll come to the impacts. Broadly, I categorized the whole fiscal policy response into broadly 5 elements. One is basically taxes, and non-tax policy response, and then public debt, and then aid, and then private sector privatization of the public assets. So I repeat: taxes, non-taxes, public debt, aid, and privatization of the public assets. So basically, when I looked at both the India and the African system, more or less we are in the same kind of situation, in the sense India's tax GDP ratio is around 11%, and whereas African, on an average, the average African country's tax GDP ratio is around 17%. Okay, but our tax GDP ratio is very, very low compared to OECD average or advanced countries average, which is around 34%. So this is a very crucial point in the sense we are facing a two different situations. One is we need to protect the tax base which is existing already, and we also need to put effort to increase the tax base. So under these circumstances, we need to face the pandemic. And because of the tax reliefs and non-tax reliefs which governments are announced, um, so then further the tax revenues are going down. So specifically, the tax policy measures, if you talk about, broadly, actually, you can categorize into various elements like deferral of tax payments and tax rebates, suspension of penalties, interest rates, and late fees, and then exemptions, and then tax amnesties. So India, when I looked at the data and literature, India as well as most of the African countries followed all these measures. Uh, India actually adapted many deferrals in tax extension of the written filing dates with respect to income tax and corporate income tax, even GST. And there were also many rebates and the penalties were waived off in income tax and corporate income tax, even GST. So no penalty, no late fee and all. And then the biggest good thing about in GST is the government initiated to give refunds in quick time. So this is the big problem, and businesses are now uh, able to solve their liquidity problem because government is releasing the refunds quickly. And another scheme, which is tax amnesty schemes, I think some of the African countries also adapted or introduced this. Gambia and Uganda actually introduced some of the tax amnesty schemes. India also have one tax amnesty scheme which was announced earlier. Now the date is extended up to 31st of December 2020. So when it comes to customs duties, there's a lot of pressure on the customs duties because there's a lot of international trade completely disturbed. But the commonality in India and African countries actually is uh, India also have a less um, or I can say not very good health system. We have, so now actually there is a lot of emphasis on the customs duties to give basically uh, waivers with respect to health sector, in the sense if you are inputting in ventilators or masks, PPE kits or any COVID related items. So the customs duties were waived off, and I see the same thing happening in most of the African countries as well. So, and when it comes to excise duties, yes, Tabo was absolutely right in the sense alcohol was banned. Even in India, alcohol is banned. Excise duty in India is in the hands of the state governments. So, after implementation of the GST, there is hardly any good tax revenue or taxation power in the hands of the state governments. So, the only good leftover taxes are excise duty and stamp duty revenue, stamp duty and registration. So in the lockdown period, actually, completely alcohol was banned even in India. And after the lifting of the lockdown, all the alcohol shops were open. So now actually state governments are getting some amount of money. So to increase the money, because they don't have many other resources, so state governments are actually increased the excise duties almost double in in some states across the states. So this is one element, and there was also with respect to non-tax revenue initiatives, there is some states implemented electricity waiver, charge waiver with respect to industries, so that they can restart their economic activity. And I suggest to some of the states to go for stamp duty and registration fee waiver also, so that new economic activity and new purchases, new real estate activity can start. These are the kind of responses from the tax front. Yes, what is the effectiveness of this? Now the question is, what is the effectiveness of this tax measures. How effective are these tax measures? Definitely, when it comes to individual, at individual level, there's a lot of flexibility in the sense, since incomes are uncertain in these COVID times. So our taxes flexibility in for return filing help to some extent. And when it comes to small and especially MSME, there's a lot of I'm sorry, there's a lot of noise.
Yeah. I think we can. Let's hold you. Your background is okay now, right?
Yes. So
I think it was an ambulance or so. Yeah.
exactly. So the at the individual level, yes, the moratorium and then income tax return filing date to some extent with no penalty is a good thing. But moreover, the small and MSME sector, small businesses and business people, they expect, apart from the tax relief, they also expecting some kind of incentives through other schemes which government is planning now and implementing now. And the refund was a big problem. Now government solved the refund issue in the GST. Same case was happening in African countries also, where the VAT refunds were delayed, and so there is a problem of VAT refunds. So I think the African countries also working with respect to VAT refunds. So in that sense, GST customs duty relaxation was a good thing. It helped to get medical equipment and all these things little, cost effectively. Yes, but I'm not sure about tax amnesty scheme across the globe. Generally, in literature, tax amnesty schemes are not successful. So even I'm not very enthusiastic about even this amnesty scheme extension of the date, and I'm not sure about African countries because their tax avoidance and tax fraud is also very prevalent. So we are in the same kind of situation. I think that this amnesty scheme, I'm not very enthusiastic. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tabo. Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah. So I think this COVID-19 similar measures were taken, like instead across the continent. We experienced extension in filing dates, on-time filing rules were relaxed, and then penalties and interest rules in most countries were also relaxed due to the COVID-19 to give taxpayers that leverage to be able to meet up with their tax obligation. So how effective is the VAT refund in South Africa to businesses?
Okay, so in South Africa, there's a couple of things that have happened in that regard. So first, the taxes have been delayed, as you rightfully pointed out. So as small businesses, our salaries taxes have been delayed. So you can delay about 60% of your liability. That's just been one of the things that has been introduced, and it's been very welcomed, from the business community. The second thing is, from an individual's tax perspective, our deadlines have also been moved. And what we like about it and what we appreciate is that because our tax systems have been modernized over the years, our tax collection system has been fully automated now. So as an individual, when I file my taxes, I will just log into our revenue services website, and all the information about my income and stuff would already be pre-populated, because the revenue services will be collecting the data from my employer, from my pension fund, medical aid, from the banks as well. And we see this as a positive move towards also reducing, tax fraud, where people, the biggest risk with any revenue services is that people underdeclare their income. So with this tax system being able to pick up all the bank accounts that are in my name, they would be able to pick up every income that's coming in. And when I file, I will just have to go in and say, this information is correct, that is correct, and the other one. is correct. There's just something that I didn't mention in the previous, in terms of what the government has done. We have had about 2.75% interest rate cuts since the lockdown, which really, reduces the burden for people. And there's also talks of, in the banking industry, where we are requesting that banks do not blacklist people, especially, SMMEs, for non-payment of, their debts over the lockdown period, because as you can understand, there would be a lot of companies and a lot of people that will be blacklisted as a result of that. So luckily our laws have been structured in a way that we are able to, how do I say it? We're able to have a payment holiday. You can apply to your bank and say, on this loan, can I have a payment holiday of about up to 3 months and not pay that? The other thing that the government has introduced is what they call the social relief program, where everyone who's unemployed gets about 350 rands as a grant that's given to them, just to help them. And other grants that were in the system were children, for example, under the age of 18, which we call social grant.
Okay, Tapo. So the 350 rand, is it like on a monthly basis, or during this lockdown period, you receive $350 as a package for you? So it's more like a relief fund.
Yeah. So it's 350 rand.
Okay.
No, 350 rands for those that are unemployed.
Unemployed,
right?
Okay.
And then if you were employed and you were retrenched, we have what we call the unemployment insurance fund, which also gives you a percentage of what you used to earn as a relief.
Okay, so what's the percentage like? So for example, let's say you make $1,000.
Yeah.
So what's the percentage for you as an employee who have been asked to stay home?
So normally it would be, you would contribute about 1% of your salary towards the unemployment insurance fund, and your employer would also contribute the same. In terms of the payments, it depends on how long you've worked, for example, but then they would give you that benefit. There's another benefit that I'm trying to think of now, but we'll come to that later. But those are some of the benefits that the government is, kind of put into place to try and relieve citizens from hardships.
Okay, thank you so much. Like we said earlier during our discussion, COVID-19 has its own positive impact. It has brought about a lot of innovation, with South Africa going to full automation into the tax system. And I'm sure most of your tax transaction is now fully automated due to this pandemic. I think Liberia, we also had the same situation wherein we went to SEMA automation. We tried to do most of our transaction online due to what was happening in the country with the limited fiscal interaction. So this takes us to our third question. Okay. So we want to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, even in India, the automation process happened a couple of years ago. And now it's completely written filing of income tax and corporate income tax, even GST. It's completely online. And even the refunds, the input tax credit, everything is credited back to your account completely online, and there's no man or officer involved there. And even this financial year, Indian budget actually is proposed to have complete, faceless interaction between the tax administration and taxpayer, which we thought, but now I think it is delayed. And now, due to the pandemic, even the tax administration said that we're not going to have any tax audits or tax prosecution in this period. So that is also one effect of the pandemic. Yes.
Okay, so that's a good measure too as well. So the third question I want to ask is that we know that Africa has a huge informal sector. According to the OECD report, we have an informal sector between 25 to 60%. Most of the economies here in sub-Saharan Africa, do have huge informal sector, and I believe that India also have the same challenge. And you know that this pandemic have affected the livelihood of many people in the informal sector, as we have huge unemployment in our countries, and we are still struggling with small businesses making ends meet. So what have been some of the direct, although I mean, you have talked about it already, because the questions and the answers that you have given me, it shows that there have been direct interventions for SMEs. So Tabo, do you mind telling us more, since you run a small or medium enterprise? Give us more like a government direct impact on your business or other businesses in these critical times, looking
So
at the
thanks
huge informality. Yeah.
Yeah. So because we work with people that are in the informal, business and try to formalize them for them to be able to scale, those are some of the things that we find. So from a policy perspective, South Africa is very fortunate because we have policies such as the skills development policies where, and I discuss this with a lot of my clients across Africa, that it's a policy that I think should be implemented. So to reduce youth unemployment, especially amongst graduates, we have an incentive scheme where if in my organization I hire a graduate, the government will pay that graduate to get at least 3 years worth of work experience. And this is part of a skills development levy that we collect through the revenue service. So it makes it easier for me, who runs a consulting firm, for example, to then get graduates. I plan to have, let's say I get 5 graduates, the government pays for them, but I'm able to still bill my other clients for that. So I still get more money without the cost. So that's one of the incentives that the government has put in, right? The other incentive from a policy perspective is that procurement, our government collects about 1.2 trillion rands. And with that amount of money, a majority of that money needs to be spent on small, medium enterprises. And given our history with apartheid, and we were previously economically excluded from running companies and being part of the economy, we've got Black economic empowerment policies that say that the government must procure from youth. The government must procure from youth that are women. The government must procure from Black-owned companies. And if a contract is big, so for example, if a contract is about 30 million rands, it is compulsory in South Africa for 30% of that contract to be given to a Black company, taking into account that we don't have a lot, of big owned companies by Black people. So that's just on the one hand. The other things that the government is also introducing is we've got taxes, for example, for what we call the small business tax, where I am able to claim twice the amount that I've spent, or I'm able to make all my tax deductions in the first year of my business operations, so that I am able to have enough cash in the bank to continue. They also run a couple of SMME, or what we call SMME, so small, medium, micro enterprises development funds, and we've got billions of rands that are available to kind of assist the small business going forward, especially post-COVID.
Okay, so during these times, SMEs are okay. Go ahead.
Yes,
You want to say something?
I just want to supplement and add, because I couldn't mention complete picture of the MSME's policy response in India earlier. So I was reading the UN ESCAP report, a recent report in Asia, South Asia, and according to the report, it is mentioned like 1.3 million people who are for working in MSME are going to be unemployed due to the pandemic, and already maybe they're already unemployed and they're pushed into poverty. So that is the kind of magnitude which is happening, impact on the MSME sector. So now how governments are actually trying to help MSME, that is a big question. So first thing is what are the problems of MSME? The problems of MSME is first liquidity crunch. I mean, you supply goods and you file GST, but you're not getting refunds, and the payment from the parties are not coming in time, so you're not able to maintain your productions because you don't have the money to continue the production. So the liquidity has to be given. Then you need to address their supply chain disruptions, and also labor shortages, because you are not in a position to pay wages because you're not getting money or business. So you need to uh, fight the employees. So instead of that, to maintain the labor also is very important. So to address these issues, some of these issues, what India, what we have now done is basically uh, come up with a program of first of all, we redefined the whole set of the definition of MSME itself. Now, actually, earlier it was we defined MSME in two ways. One is either by investment, the amount of investment you put in, or either by amount of turnover the MSME produces. So if it is earlier it was very minimal, 10 lakhs, 25 lakhs, something like that. But now it is according to the investment criteria. If the investment is about 1 crore, and then 10 crore, and then 20 crore, if that is the new definition of MSME. I mean, if it is 1 crore micro and small, 10 crore small, 20 crore medium. Through when it with respect to turnover, if it is 5 crore, it is micro, 50 crore small, and 100 crore. So that is how we redefined the whole definition, so that now more companies can avail the benefits of which are available for the my MSME sector. And second thing, yes, Tabo also rightly pointed out what happened in South Africa. Exactly, that we are also doing similar thing in India. We have something called GEM policy. Basically, GEM is basically GEM. It's all the purchases of the government go through GEM project. So GEM portal. So according to any purchases that the government is doing, now actually preferences will be given to MSME sector. That means uh, certain certain products and uh, certain amount of products actually owed certain companies and certain ministries under some schemes have to buy goods from MSME sector only. So that is the kind of restrictions we put now. And also there is a lot of delays from the government side after supplying goods to government. Then government is also trying to address those refund problems also through MSME. And another issue Tabo also mentioned in South Africa, the same thing we adapted now in India is like earlier, any project which is like more than 10 crore or 20 crore we used to advertise for global tendering. Now, actually, any project which is less than 100 crore will be only be domestic tendering, and then more preference will be given to MSME sector. So any contract worth more than less than 100 crore are going to mostly going to the MSME sector rather than going by the global tender. So these are the measures which will, I hope, help many of the MSME sectors. And other issue is, as Tabo rightly said, the startups. We didn't talk much about the startups. Startups also actually very small, and but we don't categorize them as a MSME because it's a technological startups. But there is a lot of emphasis also need to be given to startups where they also face a similar kind of MSME. So all the benefits which are there to MSME should also be applied to, according to my view, should also be applied to startups also. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, what every country is doing, I mean, from Asia or from Africa, we are all doing our best to make sure that in these critical times where COVID-19 doesn't have borders, is taking over the entire world, we'll make sure that we keep smaller businesses afloat and make sure that people who are unemployed do not go down or lost their livelihood because of COVID-19. And thanks to all of the government for all of the policy measures to ensure that our citizens and taxpayers are able to keep afloat in these difficult times. So we now move to our final question. I'm not going to say the final questions because I know people who are on this platform would like to ask their questions or make their contribution. So the question is, what policy measures should be put in place to strengthen confidence and resilience in Africa and Asia, to revamp economies? We know that after all of this, we are already experiencing revenue loss. Like South Africa said, they have lost $1 billion in tax revenue already. India is also losing billions of dollars in tax revenue. So what are some of those measures, that we can in the medium term or short term ensure that these measures are going to help to stimulate the economy and get the economy back, looking at short and medium term investment, fiscal policies that could take the economies back to normal and build our confidence and resilience again in our different economies.
Sri, you wanna take a stab at this one first?
Okay. I see this in this way, in the sense
Tabo?
like as. Hello.
Hi, Gifty. I've just asked Sri to start.
Shall I continue? Gifty?
I think you can.
Okay. The way I see it is the governments. There are two issues. If at all governments want to do something for the different sectors and infuse a lot of money, to pump a lot of money, what they primarily need is money. So there is a lot of domestic resource mobilization has to happen. Unfortunately, as we already agreed upon, and then we have seen for a couple of months, tax revenues are plummeted, and there is not much other revenues to look for. So now, what I propose, or what I am suggesting or advocating, is for both Asia and both India as well as African countries, we need to look more towards the tax reforms and more transparent taxes and more administrative reforms. Then also there is one area which the both countries are not exploited much, is basically minerals, actually, basically the mining taxes. So where there's a lot of potential at this kind of pandemic situation, India and most of the African countries are blessed with abundant natural resources. So we need to exploit that. For that, in India, the presence of foreign mining companies is very limited, unlike in Africa. Here, the main issue was the royalty, and we don't have any carbon tax as of now, but we have something called coal cess and all. But now we are gradually moving towards more, tax reforming those mineral taxes. So what I propose is, now we need to go more aggressively on these mineral taxes and this pandemic situation, which will help both Africa as well as Indian governments to mobilize a lot of resources. There are different models of tax from imposing tax also. Apart from the minerals thing, there is another aid, actually. India actually doesn't take much aid from the multilateral organizations, but most of the African countries balance out between debt and aid, public debt and aid. So according to the literature, what I observed is some aid is coming to some of the African countries. World Bank is helping with some $5 million. IMF is already helped 20 African countries with each with five this catastrophic fund, from its catastrophic fund. And apart from that, I think Welcome Fund, DFID, and many countries like China, Netherlands, India are also supporting in resource mobilization in most of the African countries. In India, actually, apart from taxes, what government is doing now is we are borrowing more. Our debt limits are increased. So aggressively at both the central as well as state level, governments are borrowing. So debt according to the Debt Threshold Act, that is called what we call the FRBM Act. Now we are going to breach that act, and act is also relaxed to allow for that. Now physical deficit may go up to 7% of GDP, and other way to do resource mobilization is through privatization of the public assets, as I mentioned earlier. So this is how the government of India is mobilizing resources, and state governments are mobilizing resources. And we have to see how, because economic revival is a short-term to medium-term activity. I mean, we have to wait and see whether all the efforts of the government will result in a good, it will shape up good. Thank you.
I think from a South African standpoint, there's a number of things that can continue being done. The first being that some of the tax deductions that we get, we've got what we call a Section 12J deduction, which is if I, as an investment company, invest in small businesses, a portion of that investment, I get a deduction from my taxes from that. It would go a long way in getting small businesses, funded by venture capitalists and so on and so forth. I think, having and adopting such a policy across the continent would help formalize the informal sector, which employs a lot of people and would stimulate economic growth. That's the first. Then the second thing is, I think what we call special economic zones, where we get tax deductions from working or building factories in those special economic zones, especially if they move towards your rural areas and your townships that are previously disadvantaged. If we can get more areas in the country that are designated as special economic zones, that will stimulate economic growth. The third thing that I think should happen is we should rely less on the government. When I was in the States last year, one of the things that blew my mind is how when we were in the state of Nebraska, there were two state disasters that were declared. And each time the state wanted to go into those areas to go and help with the floods, they said to the states, no, hold on, let us help ourselves. And if we can't, we will call you. You go and use your money on what you said you're going to do. And I think if us as the citizens of each country have that attitude that we shouldn't rely so much on the government, we should be fine. The fourth thing that I think is important is, what do our small and medium enterprises focus on, right? We need to commercialize we need to appreciate Africa. So we need to commercialize some of the things that are sustainable. I'll give an example. Investing in chicken, which is poultry, in order to address the protein deficiency across Africa. We need to now start investing in chicken that you can keep at home, instead of the broiler chickens that we buy that grow in 6 months and in 6 weeks, and for example, and they promote a consumer mentality, because you can't keep that chicken for breeding. So we need to go back and look at, in my country, in our continent as Africa, in India, we have been keeping Indian game chickens, and these chickens can live for 3 years laying eggs, and reproducing, and they've been sustaining our economies, from a very long time ago. And as SMMEs, as small enterprises, I think when we start focusing on those things that solve the problems of our particular country, it becomes easier for us to lobby and say to the government, give us tax relief here, or you can invest in this, because every government has got the investment corporation, which uses the government pension funds and puts it in different entities. So I think I think if we look at it holistically, there's a lot that we can do as the people of a country instead of just expecting the government to do everything. And that's my parting shot.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. And I believe that those that joined this Zoom conference today will understand so many things. They will have an idea about how resilient or our confidence in Africa and that of India after this after this COVID-19. So I want to thank you very much for all of the recommendations and sharing with us. We have learned a lot today, and I believe that other African countries too who participated, or citizens of other African countries who have listened to this Zoom conference today will have a takeaway. Like Thabo said, we have to depend less on government. We have to begin everything ourselves. The small and medium enterprises need to come together. We need to think outside the box and ensure that we beat COVID-19. And from the beginning of our conversation, COVID-19 has brought about a lot of innovations. And I believe that these policy measures will help to keep businesses and taxpayers afloat. So I want to say thank you to our panelists, for being part of this program. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your effort, all of the research you made to give us this. And we look forward to having more of this conversation as we strive to move both continents forward, that is Asia and Africa, to see how best we can be able to strengthen our different economics and make life better for our citizens too as well. So thank you so much for being part of this conference. And we look forward to seeing you more often.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Thabo.
Thank you, Kirti. Thank you, Thabo, and Academy for organizing this. It's a really lovely interaction and really learned a lot.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, Baba, you get on nerves.